Welcome to Wellness Curated. This is your host, Anshu Bahanda. And as you know, the aim of this podcast is to help you lead a healthier, happier, and more hopeful life. And we do so by bringing you ideas, approaches, and tools from all over the world, which will help you. So, our topic today is about our relationship with food. Most people have a love-hate relationship with food. So welcome to the chat. We have with us Neeti Desai, who's a nutritionist, and Dr. Chinmay Kulkarni, who's a psychiatrist. Thank you for joining us today. So Neeti, I'm going to start with you. There was an article in The Guardian that came out a few years ago, which talked about how we need to relearn the art of eating. Eating has become almost like a treasure hunt where people are looking for superfoods and people are looking for food with omegas, that it's taken away the joy from eating. Tell me, Neeti, is it absolutely essential to have all these huge amounts of new foods that have been recommended?
Thank you, Anshu. I think it's a very, very pertinent and topical question. I mean, going back, all the regional cuisines around the world have developed over centuries, and that basically depended on the climate and what kind of produce that region produced. So, for example, in the Far East, the island nations, and because they have large coastlines, fish or seafood became the staple. In India, because it's a large country, the coastal regions again have rice and fish, fish or seafood as their staples, while the large Gangetic plains up north are wheat-eating regions. And if you go to Europe, then the Mediterranean region, because it produces a lot of avocado, a lot of olives, a lot of grapes, this became kind of a staple of that region. So we need to go local, source out the local produce, go seasonal, follow our traditional diet, which is more or less for all the dishes. So go back to our traditions, eat local, eat seasonal, and we don't need to worry.
So, Neeti, on that note, what is healthy eating? So you're saying eat your traditional food.
To me, a balanced diet is no rocket science. If you eat a variety of foods in moderation, then that is what is a balanced diet. So the diet or your daily plate needs to be looked at, and there are very simple kind of models for that. If you have a plate where half of your plate is full of vegetables and salad, 1/4 is contains a protein rich food, and 1/4 has the carbs or the starchy foods, then you kind of achieved the so-called balanced diet.
Okay, I will come back to you later. I have a further up question, but I'll come back later. Dr. Kulkarni, I wanted to ask you, where do our ideas of food come from? Where are they shaped? How are they shaped?
So that's a little bit complicated thing because we don't know. So there is no one point at which this influence happens. However, what we start eating from childhood to young adulthood, that is very much important, and because that will generally shape uh, our food choices in the future. But after adulthood also, there are many things which influence us, like advertising influences us, what food peers are eating, that influences us. So there's no clear-cut answer to it.
So you would say that, say my children who were born in the UK, their food could potentially, the food that works for them is more important, is different from the food that works for me because I was born in India.
What food they eat at home, I would say. If majority of their meals are at home, then what is cooked at your home, that becomes their main type of. But however, that is not so simplistic.
And Dr. Kulkarni, I also wanted to ask you about eating disorders. So, I mean, the commonly known ones are anorexia and bulimia. But I believe there's a lot more eating disorders that I'd love you to talk about, because there's a lot of people I know who will stand on their scales every day, or some of them even multiple times a day. And then what happens is, if they feel their weight is even slightly higher, then they start skipping meals. So just talk to us in general about eating disorders.
Yeah. So there are many eating disorders, but anorexia nervosa, bulimia nervosa, and binge eating disorder. These are more commonly found out. And what you said, these are called as compensatory mechanisms, which are part of all these three.
And Niti, tell me, in terms of your experience with people who come with eating disorders. I mean, mostly people think it's models, it's young women. Recently, I've seen a lot of young boys who started working out, getting really careful. Talk to me a little bit about the genders that you see coming to you.
Yes, as you mentioned, in fact, earlier it was thought that this is a women-centric issue. It's highly, restricted to women, and men are above that. But we are seeing more and more that men who admit to what we call emotional eating, not that they only eat when they're hungry, but for other reasons. Also, I've had earlier it was the groom who would want to look sharp on the day of his marriage. Now we have the would-be father-in-law who says that my daughter is getting married, my son is getting married, I need to lose weight.
Right.
We've had men who said that we're going on a boys' trip, we're going for a beach holiday. I want to look sharp. I want to have a dashboard abdomen.
Yeah,
So that,
absolutely.
yes, so that issue has been there. The awareness is increasing. A lot of women are able to identify now that there is this issue is there. Earlier, we had to help them identify, but now a lot of women are aware that this is there. We just need to find strategies to deal with it.
Okay. So, Dr. Kulkarni, I want to ask you about one of these. So, there's certain things like sugar addiction or over consumption of savory snacks, which give you like a dopamine fix, I believe. But I mean, sugar is meant to be poison for sure. Would you say, I mean, I've heard different points of view. I've heard people say everything, a little bit of everything is fine, just keep it in balance. Then there is another point of view which says sugar is poison, right? Then there's a third point of view which says if you start taking these things for dopamine, your body stops making its own natural dopamine. So, can you tell me, what do we believe?
Uh, Many of these things are oversimplified in the public discourse.
Mhm.
Sugar, why people are more prone to eat sugar or enjoy sugar is because sugar is a quick source of energy. And throughout the evolution, for millions of years, humans, just like other animals, didn't have so much abundant food. At that time, the substance like sugar, which would give immediate energy,
Mhm.
was very much important.
Mhm.
So that's why the sugary foods are immediately cause the dopamine release. Basically, once that happens, then your brain learns that okay, eating this thing makes me feel good. But this is also not only related to the sugars; it is with regards to everything.
Right.
So even with healthier foods, people can have this dopamine sickness because many times people they feel good when they
Mhm.
eat healthy because they have made up their mind in such a way that I have to be healthy. If I eat healthy, I look better. I look better, and my weight will be under control. So they want that. So there also a dopamine secretion can happen even with salads without any sugar.
So, Niti, what actually is a healthy relationship to food? How would you define it?
Right. So, if we start with the basics, I mean, we all know that food is the fuel for our body. It nourishes our body. But food is so much more than just this biological necessity, right? And in fact, the act of eating has so many connotations. I mean, you prepare a special meal for your loved one. Any celebration involves food. In fact, there are most interesting conversations that are built around food and which helps you make forge friendships and collaborations. So, I mean, there are basically food plays a myriad of roles in our lives. Okay. However, food is not a reward, food is not a relaxant, and food is not your enemy. So that is what one needs to realize. And in fact, our relationship with food is one of the most important relationships in our lives. That is something we need to realize. And just like any relationship needs tending in, needs a lot of time to nurture, we need to do the same when it comes to food. But this people find it's too cumbersome, it's too slow, it's too theoretical. Why not just go on one of the diets, the popular diets, uh, and you kind of achieved your goal? But these results are short lived till you do not establish your relationship with food. So, at its core, a healthy relationship with food involves relieving yourself of the pressure of having a perfect meal every day. Every meal does not have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be the ideal combination. Also, we need to realize the cues. So, meaning that you eat when you feel physical hunger and you are able to stop when you feed comfortably full, which a lot
Okay.
of people have lost that. In addition, it also means not, placing any particular food in not go to list. I mean, that it is off limits. I can never have that food or that food group. And at the same time, not feeling bad about having that occasional indulgence, having that dessert at your friend's party. So, in a nutshell, I would say that a healthy relationship with food means that you are in control of food and it's not food that controls you.
So, Dr. Kulkarni, if you can explain to me what happens is a lot of us have got dependent on either sugar or excessively having savory snacks and the like, and which gives you a dopamine rush. How do we counter that? How do we get out of this habit?
What is important is mindful eating. All of us just watch TV and eat at the same time. And that is where we eat too much food which is not required, which usually our body will give us signal. Then first thing which you can do is do mindful eating. That means when you are eating, completely focus on your food. Uh, just look at its colors and how it smells, how does it taste. And when you start doing that, you understand that many times your relationship with food improves. Usually nowadays, what happens is that we enjoy just the first bite and the last bite of. In between, we are completely our mind is somewhere else, and we are
Yeah,
not
we're
even
unaware.
enjoying. Yeah, we are so unaware that we are not even enjoying that. If you start doing this mindful eating, then you will understand I don't need this much. This type of pattern will basically make you aware that my dopamine is secreted even when I eat a reasonable quantity. That is one of the important aspects. Second is having regular meals, routine will also make you feel better about yourself because you have achieved that. Any type of achievement secretes dopamine. So it is not that it is just the sugary foods or savory foods are going to increase dopamine.
Um, Niti, I wanted to ask you about this topic that we're talking about. You know, we touched on how food companies are promoting all these sugary drinks. So would you blame them?
It is multifactorial. Yeah, it is multifactorial. There is not one thing, one reason that I can point out to. We are living in an obesogenic environment where there are just multiple messages that are coming through different media. Earlier, everybody used to like to have some sweet.
Mm-hmm.
One would either have to get up and make it,
Mm-hmm.
or step out of the house and buy it, and then that itself, one would think, oh, it requires too much effort, forget it, and you wait for 10 minutes and that feeling passes away. Now today, whether it is 10 p.m. or it's 1 a.m. in the morning, you feel like having something, you click a button on your cell.
Absolutely.
And the food is right there in 15 minutes.
Yes.
So now there is no effort involved. The services, because they are competing with each other, are not so expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. People are, again, because of the screen time, and maybe also COVID has a role to play in it, the people are sleeping late. Everyone is sleeping late. Children are sleeping late. Everybody's watching different OTT platforms. And then naturally, you're hungry at 12 midnight or 1 a.m. and nobody eats healthy at that time. So you're taking in these whole load of calories from mainly processed foods at night time. And again, our body clock is in sync with the what we call circadian rhythm. We have a wake and sleep cycle. So we are supposed to be eating at certain times, sleeping at certain, but everything has got kind of confused. So this is one reason. The other reason is that because of social media, everybody is out there to give gyan. You have lost 5 kilos and you think you know it all, right? So there are just multiple contradictory messages being blared at you. There is more misinformation than information. So the public is kind of really confused.
Dr. Kulkarni, I have a very important question for you now, actually. There's, if you're extremely skinny or if you're obese, that's not healthy. Besides it just not being good for your health, it's also socially, it gets very awkward. People look funnily, people are excluded. So for parents to tackle a situation like this with their kids, can you advise us on what would be a good way for them to tackle it without giving the kids issues, without confusing their relationship with food?
So, see, both of these things, these extremes, there are often some psychological reasons to them. And it is important to look at these psychological reasons. So, parents first need to focus on their life and just talk to them freely and understand what is bothering them. Dealing with that is half thing done. It is important for parents to make sure that their children get adequate nutrition. That is very much important. And if there is a kind of binge eating type of thing, the child is eating too much food and that is not good for the child, also getting obesity and others. So, in such cases, sometimes restriction of food is required. Sometimes that thing also needs to be done because children, they might not know the consequences of their under eating or overeating. So sometimes, if the problem is too much, then it's better to go to a mental health professional for that.
And Niti, a lot of people today live to eat. And food should be joyful. Food shouldn't be something that you're doing mechanically, right? So how does one balance them out? What would you say?
Yes. So as I said, this whole entire behavior is also now it's called hedonic eating behavior, where one eats for pleasure. One doesn't eat because one is hungry, but one eats for pleasure. It's of course it's a balancing act, and some actionable markers would be, as Dr. Kulkarni said, one is, to engage in mindful eating. So chew your food, as it was said earlier, 36 times. Or, I mean, the point is that you need to chew your food well, don't gulp the food. No screen time while eating. So no multitasking. If you eat slowly, you're allowing your brain to tell you that, hey, I'm full, you can stop here. But when you eat so very fast, you're not allowing your brain to even tell you that you're full. So practicing mindful eating in very simple ways is one way. Another way is, of course, pay attention to the language that is being used even in the house. You say this is junk food, this is forbidden food. Do not label foods. You can have any food, as I said, in moderation. There are no good foods or bad foods. It's how frequently you have and how in what quantities you have. That's what makes it not so good or bad. So do not label foods. All foods can be part of your diet in moderation. Also, again, eat throughout the day. Skipping a meal is going to play havoc. Also, don't beat yourself with this occasional indulgence. If you've gone for a party and you've had your ice cream, do not feel so guilty. As you know, it is always said, it doesn't matter what you eat between Christmas and New Year. What matters is what you eat between New Year and to Christmas. So those 7 days of indulgence is not going to do you as much harm. You need to be worried about 11 and a half months. So again, also I was eating healthy, but now since I have broken the diet, let me go all out. No, you can just move back to your sensible eating regime the next meal, right? And regulate your social media feed. Very important.
Oh, that's a very good point as well. Yes.
Yes. And lastly, of course, if you think that you're really struggling and this is affecting your different other aspects of life also, then seek help.
So thank you for those tips. Dr. Kulkarni, you also talked about mindful eating and chewing and not being on the television. If there's one exercise that we can give adults to change the way they think about food, what would you recommend? One.
I will say, don't overdo anything. It is not necessary for you to have great food experiences at every meal. So don't overdo healthy eating also. Okay, so there is this nowadays, it's not a diagnosis yet, but there are some people who say that there should be something called as orthorexia nervosa. You are so obsessed with healthy eating that it is hampering your state of happiness and life. So
absolutely. And then you're freaking out, like Neeti just said. If you have one wrong thing, your body goes into like panic.
That's right. That's right. So have adequate nutrients. That is very important. And don't overdo anything.
And Neeti, one exercise you can give us, I know you give us a bunch of tips, but is there one exercise you can give people that's going to help people?
Just keep this basic idea in mind. Have a variety of foods. Do not get stuck to few foods or do not eliminate certain foods or food groups. Have a variety of foods, have them in moderation, and you have achieved the elusive balanced diet or the healthy eating plan.
So, Dr. Kulkarni, where do our ideas about food come from? So how are they shaped, you think?
One of the important factors is obviously as I said, evolutionary. Second aspect is the way in which we were raised. So the food habits which we have developed in early childhood So that is also very important. Third thing would be social media or styles or fads. Overall, these are the main things which kind of determine what type of relationship one will have with you.
So, Dr. Kulkarni, I also wanted to ask you, like you just said, that people are concerned about, is this healthy? Is this good? So, I find that with me and with a lot of people around me, there's constant anxiety about food. That should I be eating this? Should I not be eating this? Can you comment on that? Is that normal or is that not right?
So to some degree, it is good, but don't overdo that.
And I'm going to do a rapid fire round. Neeti, I'll start with you. Um, what are people's top concerns that they come to you with? Men, women, children?
Of course, I am a clinical nutritionist, so I see a lot of patients who have so-called lifestyle diseases like diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol levels. Of course, all of them have their origin in incorrect eating habits. So men generally, they come in when there is some medical issue. Women, yes, weight loss for different reasons. Children, unfortunately, childhood obesity is very much on the rise. So we are seeing a lot of obesity in children these days.
Okay. And common misconceptions to do with food?
Oh, there are too many. So
one or two?
One is that if I skip meal, I will eat less. And that's one of the best ways and the quickest ways of losing weight.
Okay. And how often do you think should people take their weight or BMI? Once a week? Once a month?
So somebody who is looking at active weight management, we will ask them to weigh themselves once a week, same time, same scale, same place. As you mentioned earlier, we have had people who weigh themselves before and after meals also. Mm-hmm. So like do it 6 times in a day. And of course, there are enough people who weigh themselves every day. But we generally would say once a week.
Okay. And Dr. Kulkarni, how can we tell that we or someone else needs to revisit their relationship with food? Is there a marker? One marker?
If it is causing some type of physical problem, then definitely one has to. But if it is also causing you uh, mental disturbance in a way that suppose you are obsessed with losing weight and all the time throughout the day you are thinking about, oh, am I too fat, am I too obese, and how do I lose weight and all. So that is also kind of a distress. So if any of these two things are there, then definitely.
Okay, and what age, sir, do normally the problems show up with people? Or they start showing up if there is an emotion, if there's a problem with the relationship with food? So what age should parents watch out for their children?
Yeah, so in as far as eating disorders are concerned, young adults, adolescents and young adults.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kulkarni and Neeti, for that insightful conversation. I'm sure we'll help a lot of people with that. Thank you for making time to be with us. And to our listeners, thank you for being here with us today. We hope you learned something new. We hope you learned something really important. And we hope we're going to help you lead a healthier, happier, and more hopeful life. For those of you who have questions for the experts, or if you have any suggestions on what I should cover, please send me an email. My email address is anshu@wellnesscurated.life. And if you enjoyed this show, please share it with friends. Please give us a like, and please do subscribe to this channel. We bring you something really interesting every week. Thank you for being here with us, and we'll see you next week.